was really John Bowlby's work that actually developed the idea of attachment and so on. And attachment mainly is both, initially it's a sort of behavioural system of proximity seeking. So an infant or child will proximity seek for safety. And what he outlined, and people have done a lot more research on, was that how children proximity seek and so on varies. And those were called attachment patterns, and different attachment patterns were described. Of course, the one that's good at for development is secure attachment. Right? So if you have a secure attachment, you actually show a sort of balance between dependence and need, and proximity seeking, and also a sort of so you have a relatedness, but you also have a level of independence as time goes on. Now, during development, of course, although attachment is behavioural, it eventually becomes a sort of psychological processing system as well. So we show it's an affect regulatory system. All right. So it's how we manage our emotional states, and we early on manage them by actually proximity seeking and being soothed and being looked after. But gradually, of course, we build up a mental representational system and a mental system that gives us emotional regulation. And secure attachment is very good at doing that. So people with secure attachment are able to have emotions, they can live their emotions to some level and so on, and they're constructive and useful for them. Insecure attachment, things get a little more problematic. And really, you get two sort of levels of insecure attachment, or generally two types. But in essence, you have insecure attachments, individuals show a lot of anxiety. Okay, they show more anxiety, and certainly more relational anxiety. And they can do two things with that anxiety. They can either get sort of over-involved, so they, as it were, demand off others, or they need others a lot, and they tend to demand more than other people. So they're sometimes called sort of enmeshed or over-involved or clinging and things, but it's more complex than that, because it's a whole mental process of their idea about themselves in relation to others. So that's one aspect of insecure attachment. And then the other aspect, actually, with the anxiety and relational anxiety, is that they can avoid. They tend to retreat, and they keep themselves to themselves. So they don't form relationships in the same sort of mutually constructive way as other people. If your relational social world becomes less manageable to you, less ability to cope with it, you will show more anxiety, so you will get certain symptoms starting to be generated potentially. So you may become isolated, you get anxious, you become more avoidant, you actually may become depressed and so on. So you're more likely to have these sorts of symptoms. And we know also that cognitive development itself, as well as emotional development, is significantly better in secure attachment. So over time, you can even get cognitive underperforming and so on. And that itself, of course, can lead to mental health problems. So with the insecure attachment, just going back to that, relationships is one major area where it's obviously going to show itself. And that's why attachment is so central to conditions like borderline personality disorder. So, because people with borderline personality disorder, one of the main areas of problem is their relationship difficulties. And a second area of problem is, of course, their emotional regulation. And attachment processes developmentally are significant in forming the emotional regulatory system, and particularly, as I said, in relational management of emotions and so on. So it's a core area for borderline personality disorder, and indeed probably for other personality disorders as well. I wouldn't say it's because of, but I think you have to see these personality functioning processes as an interactional process between this sort of genetics, you know, what they're born with from our mum and dad, our parents, whoever, and actually then the environmental processes that impact on that, and then how that's expressed. And that's a very complex interactional process. So how we end up with borderline personality disorder, I think, is a mix of those. But the mentalizing and poorer vulnerability to losing mentalizing capacities quickly is a part of that, and a core part of it.